Hello and welcome to the multicolored part of my Karlov Manor limited set review. Today, of course, I'm going to be talking about all of the many multicolored cards in the format and talking about how good I think they're going to be in limited specifically. So, if you have not been here before, these are the tiers I use to talk about the cards. Let me get out of the way. Essentially, they may be a little bit different than some of the tiers other people use. Tier 1 is good, Tier 5 is bad. These are kind of a general sense of what this is supposed to mean. If you have not been here before, please take a look at it. But we're just going to get right into the cards. With the first one here, Argus cost Spirit of Justice, 2 red-white for a 2/4 with double strike and vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to one target creature. If it's suspected, exile it, otherwise suspected. So this one, I was debating between Tier 1 and Tier 2. Basically what it comes down to is how much suspecting is going on in the format. And I would say that there's a lot of suspecting going on in the format. Like, your opponent is, I think, more than likely going to have a suspected creature in about 50% of your games. So, and on turn 4, this is, like, they're going to have played it a lot of times, and, like, on turn whatever. This kind of reminds me of, like, Eowyn from, Lord of the Rings, where it just, like, exiled something with power greater than it, and I was like, oh, it's never going to actually trigger. And it actually did trigger, like, I don't know, somewhat often. This, I think, is going to fall into a similar category, where it's just like, well, I killed your thing, and then I get to just start suspecting my creatures and stuff. Has vigilance, too. The base rate is not super exciting. You can suspect this if you want as well when it attacks, which is probably pretty good, because you are getting a double striker with Menace at that point. Yeah, I think this card's really good. Alquist Proft Master Sleuth, 1 white-blue for a 3/3 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, investigate, and you can pay X blue and sacrifice a clue to draw X cards and lose X or gain X life. He's got Tetris pieces. I don't know what the deal is with that. B's been playing Talos Principle. Yeah, I mean, this is just good. Like, I put this one in Tier 1, just an really efficient card. 3 mana, 3/3 Vigilance, Investigate is just super strong by itself, and then if your opponent doesn't kill it by turn 6 and you have a clue on the battlefield, you can just Sphinx's Rev and probably win the game. So, you know, not bad. Not bad. Like, yeah, I mean, if you ever are comfortable, like, activating the ability on this guy, you basically just win. Like, it's really difficult to come back from that. The amount of value that generates. But I think in most games, just a 3 mana 3/3 that makes a clue, it's gonna be really solid. Continuing the bangers, in my opinion, Anzrag the Quake Mole, 2 red-green for an 8/4. When it becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase, and you can pay 3 red-green and to make it block each combat this turn. Make it be blocked each combat this turn if it's able to be blocked. So, I mean, like, this card, I mean, when you think about what this is, mostly, it's a 4 mana 8/4. How good would a 4 mana 8/4 be? Like, if this were just a 4 mana 8/4 with no additional text, it would be like a Tier 2 card, I think. Like, that's just a lot of power. And, 4 toughness is enough. Like, if it were, like, even 3 toughness, I would start to be like, I don't really like it very much. But 4 is a lot of toughness. Especially in this format, this is enormous. This is a very big card to be playing on turn 4. And your opponent doesn't really want to block it. So, it's just going to, like, the amount of damage that this threatens to do is enormous. It reminds me of kind of like the Hammer Skull last set, where that was a 3 mana 6/6. This is like a 4 mana 8/4. Like, that's similarly powerful stat line. Obviously, it would just, if you were to average the stats out, it would be the same total of 12 statistical points total, and it's a 1 mana value higher on this card. The distribution is probably worse in this particular case, but I don't think it's, like, that much worse. I think a 7... I don't know what the best stat line on that type of creature is. Maybe it's 7/5, because then it's a 3-turn clock by itself. That might be the best. That might be the actual best one. But, This, this looks good to me. It is a lot of stats, and it's an enormous threat that your opponent basically has to answer, and they're never winning a race against it because whatever, they can't chump it. You can trade with it. It's going to be tradable, but if you block it, then they get to attack with their creatures again. So it's, that's kind of a problem. I just see this being an enormous pain to deal with. Assassin's Trophy, black-green for an instant. Destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Yep, it's a reprint. In limited, these type of effects are not very good. You can play it, but it's, ramping your opponent is a pretty huge cost. It's a removal spell that you can't cast on the first 4 to 5 turns of the game, which makes it a lot worse. Great against some decks, and really, really terrible against other decks. So it is more of a sideboardy option than a lot of cards, and you just kind of have to be careful with how you use it. And I've put it in tier 4 because it's just, maybe this is like realistically a tier 3 card, like it is pretty average. But I've put it in tier 4 to prove a point that like it is not a premium card and you should not draft it highly. But people are going to anyways, and there's not really anything that we can do about it. Aurelia, the Law Above. 3 red white for a 4/4 flying vigilance haste. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card, and whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia deals 3 damage to each of your opponents, and you gain 3 life. Yeah, I mean, this is just a house. We've seen, 5 mana 4/4 haste has been like good. Shadowfax from Lord of the Rings. Now Shadowfax had additional abilities, but this has additional abilities too. Yeah, it's just a house. You're just, getting in. It's pretty likely that on turn 5 you're going to be able to attack with 3 creatures and draw a card. I would say that happens 60% of the time, something like that, on turn, like when you're playing this on turn 5, and even if you don't, it's not that bad. Like, you're still just getting in for 4, and just a lot of damage. So, not much to say here. Like, if you ever attack with 5 creatures, you probably are just winning. Card just takes over the game immediately. Blood Spatter Analysis. Black-red for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to target creature an opponent controls. And then when more creatures die, mill a card and put a Bloodstain counter on Blood Spatter Analysis. Then sacrifice it if it has 5 or more counters on it. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, this is just really solid value removal spell. Even if you draw it late and you don't get to cash it in, that's okay. You still got a 2 mana deal 3. It's a sorcery speed. That's not like a complete disaster. But if you play this early on like turn 4, which I think is probably the turn you want to play this the most, it starts with 1 counter, so you only got to have 4 more creatures die. Now it is 1 or more, so if creatures die at the same time, it doesn't trigger multiple times. But yeah, I mean, this is just a removal spell that eventually maybe gets you some value, and that's excellent. So, really strong card. Breakout. Red-green for a sorcery. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You reveal a creature card from among them. If that card has mana value 2 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield, and it gains haste until end of turn. If you didn't put the revealed card onto the battlefield this way, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library random order. So these type of, like, look at the top whatever number of cards, and then put 1 into your hand, tend to not be very good. They just are kind of like 2 mana to not do anything. You can obviously play them if you have better cards in your deck. Like if you have one of these tier 1 rares that you want to find more often, you can maybe play one of these and it's like not a disaster. This one I like more than most because if you miss and you find only like a 2-drop, you can put your 2-drop into play and it's got haste. That's not horrible. That's like a good buyout. Now it still has the problem where sometimes it just completely whiffs, but that shouldn't happen very, very often, especially if you're building your deck right with the card. But yeah, I think this is okay, but not anything excellent. Buried in the Garden, 2 green-white for an enchantment. It's an aura. It enchants a land. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent you don't control until it leaves the battlefield, and whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional 1 mana of any color. So, it's 4 mana ramp that also is removal. I think that's pretty good. I think it's a good card. 4 mana removal, remove anything, is good, is just typically pretty good. Getting the ramp, how much value is there? In this format, there's more value than most with Disguise. There's going to be bigger creatures in your deck, bigger cards, higher mana value cards in your deck. Sometimes the best decks are still not going to have that necessarily be the case. It would be my feeling, but we'll see. And this looks solid to me, but not anything super like it doesn't look amazing, but it doesn't look bad. It looks like your typical set post uncommon. Technically, no board impact. Like it's not one of the we saw the ones of these for 4 mana in white in like Brothers War and Dominator United that immediately did something when they entered the battlefield. This one does not do that, but I still think it's pretty good. To your next card, Cease and Desist. Ceases 1 and a hybrid black-green for an instant, and you exile up to 2 target cards from a single player's graveyard. Target player gains 2 life and draws a card. And Desist is 4 hybrid green-white, green-white. I don't know how to read these well. Destroy all artifacts and enchantments. So there's a cycle of these split cards. This one is good. I think all of them are going to be playable in some capacity. This one looks fine. This one specifically is probably the most interesting because it's the green one, and green is, I think, the most collect evidence-y of the colors. I don't know. All of the colors will not be collecting evidence, I think, except like red is the one that cares the least about it. And like it's more of like a Sultai? I don't know. Blue and green are definitely the heaviest, I think, and black maybe a little bit as well. So Sultai is kind of where you want these, because these count for 8 mana for collect evidence. If you did not know that, when they're in your graveyard, it counts for 8 total mana. So they basically fuel all your collect evidence stuff by themselves. So yeah, I like the Cease side of this. The Desist is just kind of like a nice added bonus. Sometimes you're gonna cast. I don't think you're like ever really gonna cast it, but sometimes maybe you cast it. Coerced Kill. 3 blue-black for an aura enchantment. Enchant creature you control, enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has base power and toughness 1/1, has death touch, it is an assassin in addition to its other types. So it's like a treachery, but instead of stealing the creature, you get a 1/1 death toucher, and if they have a way to interact with enchantments, you lose your guy. So this is a really interesting card because, obviously it's going to be great. It's going to be a really good card, I think. But it does have downsides that some of these other effects don't have. It also has upsides that other effects don't have. It is 5 mana as well. Mind Control too good for limited, apparently. It is actually interesting that they, this is basically not strictly worse Mind Control, but worse Mind Control. I think they printed Mind Control in a core set, so I'm kind of surprised they haven't rejacked on that. So it's like we can't give blue actually good cards that are removal spells. That's not true. They've done some good blue removal, and even this set they're trying again with blue removal. But yeah, I like this card. This card's good. Crowd Control Warden. 3 green-white for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of other creatures you control, and it is disguised for 3 hybrid green-white. Yeah, it really just so this is like a 5 mana 4/4 that sometimes is bigger than that. Your payoff for having other creatures is that this becomes like an actually illegal card to put in your deck. Like a 5 mana 4/4 is very bad. A 5 mana 5/5 is not very good, and a 5 mana 6/6 is okay, you kind of got there. So you're not getting a discount on the disguise. You're gonna have other stuff you want to disguise on turn 3. So having disguise, I would say the disguise on this almost doesn't matter really. I think you're basically never gonna do that unless you have actually nothing else to do on turn 3. And I think if that's the case, you are either very unlucky or have built your deck poorly, because this format has tons of stuff to do on 3. So not excited about these pure stats, green-white cards they print every once in a while. Curious Cadaver. 2 blue-black for a 3/1 flyer. When you sacrifice a clue, return it from your graveyard to your hand. I'm not super excited about this. The reality is, in limited, it's really hard to sort of make these type of effects work, where it's oh, it's in my graveyard, and then now I get to return it and get value. The front side of the card is not very good. It's a 4 mana 3/1 flyer, which isn't the worst stat line ever on a flyer, but it also isn't very good. There isn't a ton of X1 hate in the format, but it is still an X1 and still doesn't block well. So yeah, I mean, I think this card is kind of fine. It's just if the format is really uber super slow, grindy value, whatever, I could see this being better for sure. but I just, you know, I don't really buy it. It's going to be that slow. Like if this format becomes like Theros Beyond Death level slow, this card is going to be good. If it's not that slow, which I think is more likely, I just don't really see this type of value being especially premium. Deadly Complication. 1 black-red for a sorcery. Choose one or both. Destroy target creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on target suspected creature you control. You may have it no longer become suspected. Yeah, I mean, this just, you know, looks really good to me. It's just a 3-mana removal spell, you know. And also, you get to put a like, you're going to have suspected creatures in red-black. You're just going to have it. And if you don't have one, it's not a complete disaster. Like, you're just casting a murder, which is in the set, by the way. And this card is just strictly better and easier to cast in red-black. In the deck that you're playing it in, it's easier to cast, most likely. So, I don't know, I like it. Solid. I put it in tier 1 instead of tier 2 because I think that, you know, this is the type of card where it's like, oh, this is why red-black is so good and limited often. But we'll see in this format that it just had its worst set in like 3 years, so we'll see if it bounces back in a big way. Detective's Satchel. 2 blue-red for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, investigate twice. Oh no, my voice is gone. I've lost it. And you can tap it to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and you activate only if you sacrifice an artifact this turn. So I have a lot of concerns about this card. I've put it in tier 3. That's actually kind of high, considering that it does literally nothing when it enters the battlefield from a board presence perspective. However, it threatens to do a lot of things over the course of the game. If you play this on turn 4, you get 2 clue tokens. If you have a way to sacrifice an artifact that turn, and you're like for productively, then this is just great because then you immediately get your 1/1 back. And there is enough ways in blue and red to do that. That this card should be good. Should be good if you have them, right? If you have a critical mass of free saccolets. And even if you don't have them, cracking the clue, like, this is like gonna draw you some cards. It's gonna make some guys. It works well with all of the stuff red is trying to do specifically. Like every single red card is like a artifact sacrifice payoff. So I feel like this card helps out a lot, specifically with red. So I like it. I don't love it, but I am putting a little bit of faith in giving this a tier 3 grade instead of tier 4 grade based on the amount of board impact it has. Dogwalker. Red-white for a 3/1 vigilance, disguise for red-red white-white, and when it's turned face up, create 2 tapped 1/1 white dog creature tokens. Wow. Like this card, like, what a house. This is one of the disguise cards that you're going to just play in either red or white decks. You can play it because the base mode on this is the disguise and then flip on 4 mode. You can play it on 2 mana. It is like the only 2 mana 3/1. Like there are not very many 2 mana 3/1s, so it is kind of like the best 2-drop. Like if you played this on turn 2, it is kind of like the best thing on the board. But I think the value that this has the potential to generate is just too difficult to pass up for me personally. And yeah, it's a good. It really matches up well on turn 4 when you disguise flip it, right? Because attacks into their disguised creature, and then it also can block on the back end because it's vigilance. Like I don't know. This card just seems like a house to me. Doppelgang. Triple X, green, blue for a sorcery. For each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So for 5 mana, you get a clone. That is not a good rate. That's pretty bad. A 5 mana clone by itself would be probably a tier 4 card, I would say. However, this card has the opportunity to also, on turn 8, for 8 mana, copy 2 things and create 2 copies of each of them. Which basically is going to win you the game most of the time that you do that. So, for that reason, I've put it up into tier 2, and not quite tier 1 just because it is expensive to get to 8 mana, which is really where you want to be. If you are casting it for 5, it's probably not, the game probably isn't going super well for you. So, yeah, I'm not like in love with it, but I think, you know, the added little bit of flexibility is nice, and you can get to 8 mana. Like it is an achievable goal. The worst part about this card is the colors that it is in, which are blue and green. So we'll see. We'll see if maybe this is the format where they figure it out. Drag the Canal. Blue black for an instant, create a 2/2 white and blue detective creature token. If a creature died this turn, you gain 2 life, surveil 2, and then investigate. Man, this card is just excellent. Wow. It's so much value. Like the absolute worst case scenario is you're making a 2/2 flash for 2 mana. Now, I will probably literally never do that, because doing so would admit that I failed to get value on this card, which I would never not get value. So, I mean, like it's just like if a creature died this turn, you get to get an investigate token, which is basically drawing a card, kind of. You get to surveil 2, which is also basically drawing a card, and then you get to gain 2 life. Like, it's just that's so much for 2 mana. For 2 mana on your 2/2, you get to do all these things. Yeah, I mean, this card's just unreal good. Etrada, Deadly Fugitive. 1 blue-black for a 1/4 Death Touch. Face-down creatures you control have 2 blue-black to turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile it, and then you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. And it also has whatever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. So it's like it generates value when it hits your opponent. It's going to be really tough for them to block it, because it's a 1/4 Death Touch. Yeah, I mean, it also helps you, if you have like big cloaked or disguised things, it can help you like flip them. It can help you cast your opponent's things that are flipped. So yeah, just really good value engine. Your opponent has to kill it. If they can't, they're probably going to lose instantly. Not instantly, but over like 3 turns. Evidence Examiner, green-blue for a 2/2 at the beginning of combat. On your turn, you may collect evidence 4. Whenever you collect evidence, investigate. So I like this card. It looks good. Like, this is a blue-green signpost, and blue-green, again, hasn't been good in a very long time, but is this this looks pretty promising. It looks more promising even than some of the last ones, where like it is an enabler and a payoff, which is really important. And it works with the themes in blue and green, which is collecting evidence. You want to be collecting evidence in blue-green, and yeah, I really like this card. Now, I have given it a tax of being in blue-green and put it in tier 3 instead of tier 2, because I've been burned too many formats in a row. So we'll have to see. But there's mild optimism for blue-green, at least based on this card and some other cards we've seen. Ezrim Agency Chief, 1 white, blue for a 5/5 flying. When it enters the battlefield, investigate twice, and you may pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact, and it gains Vigilance, Lifelink, or Hexproof until end of turn. Yeah, so this basically, like with this card, you're never gonna play. You're gonna just treat it like it's 6 mana, because at that point your opponent kind of just can't kill it ever. You could play it on 5 if you're feeling risky, if you're feeling like great, if you're feeling good about yourself. You can play it on 5 and be like, yep, they're never gonna have removal. But sometimes they do have removal, so you might want to wait. Yeah, this is just a house. Like, even if you do play it on 5 and they just kill it, like whatever, you still got like 2 investigate clue tokens out of the deal, and you use their best removal spell, because only their best removal spell is killing this. So looks pretty good to me. I don't not a whole lot of complaints. The only issue is the mana cost. It is double white, double blue, so you gotta be really heavy in white and blue. But I don't think that's gonna be that big of a cost, to be honest with you. Because again, like, playing this on 6 arguably is better than playing it on 5, and so like you get an extra mana to like even figure out that mana based situation. Fairy Snoop, 1 blue-black for a 1/4 flying disguise for 1 hybrid blue, hybrid black. I can't. When it's turn face up, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand and the other into your graveyard. So, This card is awkward, and the reason it's awkward is, unlike a lot of the disguise cards, you can't, like, you can flip this up on turn 4, and it's like okay, but it doesn't fit as well, because with a lot of them it's like, oh, it's 2 mana to flip it, which I assume this originally was, by the way. I assume it's at some point during development this was black, blue, like 2 hybrid blue-black to flip it, and then it was probably too good, and they were like, okay, fine. And they bumped it to 3, which I think is a pretty significant cost, because playing this as a 3-mana 1/4 flyer is not ever going to happen. Like, you're never going to do it. If you do it, you're losing the game, probably. There are some scenarios I can think of where it would happen, but it's pretty unlikely. So you're probably always disguising this on 3, and then on turn 4, the best thing to do is probably just hold up your mana and then flip it on their turn, would be my guess. And it still isn't like super great at that, because yeah, I don't like love that, because it's just, you're kind of using your 2 turns to do this, and it's like a lot of mana. But I'm still keeping it in tier 3 because it does generate value. It, it draws you a card and puts one into your graveyard. Unfortunately, this is not Organ Hoarder. This is definitely not Organ Hoarder, I don't think. A lot more expensive, and the body is actually like probably worse. So I would describe myself as like not a huge fan of this card, but I have hope. I think it's probably good, but I don't think it's like one of the nice things about it is you can play it in either blue or black, because you're never casting the 3-mana 1/4 flyer version of it. So this is another one where it's like, yep, don't need to be in blue black. You can just be in blue or black, and you'll be happy to play it in either place. Next split card, Flotsam and Jetsam. So Flotsam is 1 and a hybrid blue-green to mill 3 cards and investigate. Jetsam is 4 and double 2 blue-black hybrids for a sorcery. Each opponent mills 3 cards, then you may cast a spell from each opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If its spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard exile instead. I like this quite a bit. So one thing about this is that both of the modes on this are relevant. I know that the Flotsam mode looks really bad. It's 2 mana to mill 3 and then investigate, which is not a good deal. It's not. You're like maybe getting your card back eventually, but in decks that have collect evidence stuff, and blue is the color that does that, that's like pretty valuable, and there is a bunch of graveyard things going on, and like having that buyout on turn 2 or turn 4 to be like, I'm gonna just cast this, and it's gonna help smooth my draw out a little bit, and help me spend my mana over the course of the game, and like that seems good to me. And then on like turn 6, you just get to cast whatever. Like if your opponent milled like a later on in the game, you can be like, well, I killed their like best card, and then I get to cast it later with this card, and that just seems really good to me. Like it's just something like I like that. I really like that effect. I think that effect is actually pretty strong, especially given that you can just cast this early and it's not a complete disaster. So I like it. I think it's a solid card. Fuss and Bother. So Fuss is an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control, and Bother is 4 white blue. God, I can't say these things costs well. 6 mana. Create 3 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying and surveil 2. So both of these modes in their own right are very strong. Bother is the inherently stronger mode by itself, but Fuss, obviously, if you have a board of like 3 or more creatures, is pretty good. You're going to be casting Bother most of the time, but it's nice. It's nice to have, a finisher in your deck that doesn't take up like a slot of a card that impacts the board, and this is sort of like a way to do that. Now, the one downside it does have is you kind of have to treat it like it's a 6-drop. You kind of have to say, hey, I'm basically treating this like it's a 6-drop in my deck, because either modes of this I'm not casting until turn 6. So Yeah, that is the concern, is there's not that much flexibility, but I'm not that worried. I think this just really is good. So I think the bother mode is good enough by itself that I'm happy to just include it and put it in tier 2. Gadget Technician. 2 blue-red for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. It has Disguise for 2 blue-red hybrid mana. Yeah, I like this card quite a bit. So you can disguise this on 3. It's maybe not necessarily what you want to do. You can play this in blue or red decks, and it's just a lot of most of this cycle is decent. I think are pretty good cards. So I think this one is not an exception to that, and will help you to smooth out your draws a little bit. And next two permanents. One of them's a Thopter that's an artifact and has flying. One of them's a 3/2 that trades off pretty well. So, Gleaming Cure Drake. Excuse me. Blue-red for a 1/1 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, investigate, and whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a ++1 counter on it. What a house. This card is just wow. Wow. I have put it into tier 1. The reason I think is fairly simple. It is a 2-mana 1/1 flyer that investigates when it enters the battlefield, which is better than drawing a card in this format, I think. I'm going to just go out and say it. I'm just going to say investigating in this format is probably better than drawing a card. I know that's kind of a hot take. It may seem like that's just inherently dumb, but I kind of think that having the artifact on the board and all this synergy with it actually makes this better than drawing a card. Because it also enables itself to grow bigger. So I think if this said draw a card, it would actually be worse in this format. So that's kind of how highly I'm valuing investigating in the format. And yeah, no, this just works with all your sacrifice payoffs. It does everything blue-red wants to do. It's just it is a threat by itself. Your opponent has to kill it. It already got value. It continues to get value over the course of the game. Yeah, just excellent. Granite Witness, 2 blue-white for a 3/2 flying vigilance with disguise for 2 hybrid blue-white. When it's turn face up, you may tap or untap target creature. I'm not super thrilled about this one, because I don't know how relevant the turn face up mode is, but because if you think about it like this, would you play a 4-mana 3/2 flying vigilance? Nah, I don't think I would. So you kind of have to be getting value out of the tap mode, and I don't really know if you're going to be doing that so much. This one, more than the other ones, you're not going to just immediately flip up on turn 4, which makes me hesitant to say that it's as good. It is nice to be attacking with a flying vigilance creature on 4, but the tap or untap target creature mode, I think it's just kind of janky. It's jankier than the other ones, I would say, and I probably should move it down a tier as a result of that. But I'll leave it here for now. I do think blue-white is the best deck, so it's gonna be good it's gonna be playable in the detectives deck. So that's what I think it's gonna be. I think this is kind of more of a blue-white card than the other ones are a card that can't be mono. This one really is less monocolor utility than the others. Hustle and Bustle. Hustle is a 1 blue-red hybrid instant, and target creature attacks or blocks this turn if able. And Bustle is a 4 double red-green hybrid sorcery. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until end of turn. You may turn a creature you control face up. So, interestingly, I literally can't in my... Oh, no, it does work. Okay, it works. Okay, ignore my chain of thought that is irrelevant. So I like this card quite a bit. I put it into tier 2 just because this one has flexibility, right? Neither of these modes is a card that you would really play in your deck, because they're just too situational. But I think this is the perfect type of one of them is situational in a way that it's it can be Bustle would be situational in a way that sometimes you just literally can't cast it, and then Hustle would be situational where it's you draw it and you just don't want to you just don't have good attacks or blocks. So like they kind of help each other out. It's very like nice to just have, again, like it's nice to have your finisher attached to a card that can do something else in the game, because it just is so much easier to justify playing it in the deck. Now, you need to be playing red mana to do that. Like I think this is, yeah, this one, like I don't think you're just gonna play this in like green decks. Like I don't think blue-green decks are gonna want to play this. Maybe if you're blue-green you could play it, and it wouldn't be so bad. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about it more, about whether or not I like it. I think it's probably fine in that deck. But, yeah, I think you know, any red deck can probably play it and be somewhat happy about it, and, you know, blue-green decks can maybe play it. Like, you definitely, I don't think you want to play this if you're, like, just blue or just green, but maybe it's good enough that you can, maybe you can justify that, but that's not where I'm starting. Ill-timed Explosion. 2 blue-red for a sorcery, draw 2 cards, then you may discard 2 cards. When you do, Ill-timed Explosion deals X damage to each creature, where X is the greatest mana value among cards discarded this way. I really like this card. So we saw the card in Strixhaven that was like a 5 mana Wrath that had you exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard and you dealt damage equal to the mana value. This is worse than that card as a Wrath. However, it also draws you 2 cards up front if you just want to draw cards. So I really like this. I think this is really flexible. It does have the problem of I didn't draw an expensive enough spell to clear my opponent's board. You know, whatever. But it also has the modality of saying, well, I actually want to discard a cheap spell, and then I have like a 4/4, and they have like 3 2/2s, and I get to kill the 2/2s, and I keep my 4/4. So it kind of like goes both ways here. And as a result, I think this card's just excellent. You can just pay 4 mana to draw 2 cards at sorcery speed, which is very bad, but despite being very bad in some situations, like, it's good to have access to that. If the game is, you know, stalled out and your opponent's the one with the big creatures, you can just draw 2 and try to find your removal spell and move along with your day. So I really like this card. I put it in tier 1, which is maybe higher than like you might think. I could maybe it's just a 2/2 card and whatever. But and you know, potentially like blue-red isn't really doing this. Like it's not a thematic fit in blue-red decks. So that does worry me a little bit. That doesn't quite fit with what blue-red's trying to do in the format, and I think that is a legitimate concern. But you can kind of build a deck around this, and I think you're going to be happy to do so. Insidious Roots, green black for an enchantment. Creature tokens you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 plant creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. So up front, this enchantment does literally nothing. It does no board impact, and it is there's no impact immediately. You need to like find ways to get creatures into your graveyard first of all, and then get them out of your graveyard. If you can do that 2 times, you will be happy with this card. Now, that's a lot of times. 2 is a lot of times for creatures to be leaving your graveyard. So that concerns me. However, you know, I haven't put this straight up into tier 5 because I'm like, well, you know, collect evidence and all that stuff. There are ways to get creatures out of your graveyard. I can't spell. And like I do have like there's like a little bit of me that's like, oh man, wow, look at the dreams that you could live with this card. But you know, at the end of the day, is this a dream? Is this a dreaming scenario, or are we just not living the dream? And if you're a dreamer and you can get this to work, it's just like I have a lot of concerns about the creatures leaving the graveyard thing, but maybe it does get there. Izoni, Center of the Web. 4 black-green for a 5/4 menace. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may collect evidence 4. If you do, create 2 2/1 black and green spider creature tokens with menace and reach, and you can sacrifice 4 tokens to surveil 2 and then draw 2 cards and gain 2 life. Yeah, I mean, this card's really good. Like, this card's just a house, right? 6 mana, you make... It kind of looks like Tovolar's Huntmaster at home, you know? Where it's just like... I make, you know, two dudes that have Menace and Reach, and then I have Menace, and then I can like the sacrifice tokens ability, probably not super relevant, but comes up sometimes, I'm sure. Yeah, not a whole lot to say about this card other than that it's just very good. Judith, Carnage Connoisseur, 3 black red for a 3/4. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, and you can create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So this card is very similar to the Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, the 5 mana, the blue. This is this, but in blue red, and it had like other different abilities that were similarly powerful, except when you cast your 3rd when it went back to your hand. I thought that card was going to be very bad. It actually ended up being pretty good. Not like especially great or anything, but good. It was a good card. I thought it was going to be unplayably bad because it was a 5 mana 3/4 with no enter the battlefield ability. And so this, I'm looking at with a similar lens and saying, you know, on its face, you would think, maybe not so great. But the joke is that, like, your opponent basically has to kill it. If your opponent doesn't kill it, you just immediately win because you cast an instant or sorcery spell and you make a 2/2 red imp that like is just insane. So like if you ever make one imp, this card is excellent. If on turn 6 you play this and then you shock your opponent's biggest thing and then give it Death Touch and kill their thing, excellent card. So it's a little bit of a build round. You do need to have like 8 instants or sorceries in your deck. Ish. 6 is like the bare minimum. But that's just gonna happen. That in black and red, that's just gonna be a thing that is happening. Like, you're just gonna have them. So I think this card's just good, basically. Kaya, Spirit's Justice, 2 black, blue, or 2 white, black. Wow, I don't know where I was going with that. For a 3 loyalty planeswalker. It has a static ability that is a paragraph long. Whenever one or more creatures you control and or creature cards in your graveyard are put into exile, you may choose a creature card from among them until end of turn. Target token you control becomes a copy of it, except it has flying. Yep. Alright, it has a +2 that surveils 2 and then exiles a card from a graveyard, which triggers the long ability. It has a +1 that makes a 1/1 black and white spirit creature token with flying, and it has a -2 exile target creature you control. For each other player, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. So this is mostly just a planeswalker that makes 1/1 flyers over and over again, which is really annoying and very good. So that's why I put it in tier 1. The other modes will come up sometimes. The other text on the card will come up sometimes. Basically, if you just pay 4 mana and start making 1/1 flyers, your opponent's going to be in for a bad time. So Kellen, Inquisitive Prodigy. Oh man, 2 green blue for a 3/4 flying vigilance. When it attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If you controlled that permanent, draw a card. And it also comes with an adventure, which is a sorcery. Tail the suspect for blue-green. Investigate. You may play an additional land this turn. Yeah, so it comes with a what's it called? I don't know what it's called. This card's just a house. Like this card just does everything. Value, tempo. It's a vigilance flyer for 4. Destroys your opponent's artifacts, which is going to absolutely hose some people randomly. It fixes the problem of like, it gives you like the 2 mana adventure, really relevant and important. Like it just slots super nicely into your curve of like 2 and 4 mana instead of like having like there's so much stuff that's 3 mana. 2 and 4 mana are really valuable numbers of mana to like have in a format where that's the case. This does both of those things, so really solid card. Crowl Whipcracker, black-green for a 3/2 reach. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target token an opponent controls. Yeah, it's just really solid. You know, if you 2 mana 3/2 reach just by itself is a pretty good card. And sometimes your opponent's got tokens, and they're pretty likely going to have investigate tokens. Like everybody's going to be investigating, so I expect this to hit a token close to like 80 to 90% of the time. Maybe that's a little high. Maybe it's just closer to 80. So I don't know. It's good either way. Kylox Voltstrider. 1 blue-red for a 4/4 collect with it's a vehicle. Collect Evidence 6, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. It has Crew for 2. And whenever it attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from among cards exiled with it. If that card would be put into a graveyard, instead put it on the bottom of its owner's library. So notably, you have to pay to cast the spell that you're exiling with it. Now, I will say this, it is value. Like, you are getting value out of the thing. The jankiness of it is not lost on me, and that's why it's in tier 3 instead of being higher. But it's also, you know, it's not... the fact that it does generate some value keeps it out of the doldrums, the lower tiers that some other cards find themselves in. And, yeah, I would describe myself as a fan of this card to a certain extent. The Crew 2 helps, because once you've collected evidence once, it may be hard to do it again, so then you can crew it, and then whatever, it has like threat of activation, because your opponent can't attack into it and be like, well, they can just collect evidence 6, and then whatever. So it's nice. It can block on turn, well, probably not on turn 3, but it can sometimes block the turn you cast it, and that solves some of the problems that vehicles have. Yeah, it does generate some value. I like that. Kylox Visionary Inventor, 5 blue-red for a 4/4 with Menace, Ward Tube, and Haste. When it attacks, sacrifice any number of other target creatures and exile the top X cards of your library or X is their total power. You may cast any number of instant or sorcery spells from them in the exiled cards without paying their mana costs. Yeah, this, I don't really want to spend too much time on this card. It's just, like, how much would you pay for a 7-mana 4/4 Menace Haste? Like how good do you think that card is? I would say not very good, so that's kind of what the card is. Lazev, Wearer of Faces. Blue-black for a 2/3. When it attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, then investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a crew, you may have Lazev become a copy of target creature card exiled with it until end of turn. So you can do some weird, like, reanimatory stuff with this. Kinda. Yeah, because of instant speed activations. Like, you can attack with this, exile a thing, and then, before damage, you can sacrifice the clue and turn this into the thing that exiles. So that's like a cool little interaction. I like that a lot. It's a cool little design. In terms of what the card's doing, the fact that it has to have a target concerns me a little bit, because, I mean, it's just a great 2-dropper. You play it on turn 2, you're going to be happy about it. It's going to have decent attacks on turn 3 even, because of the fact that, because of Disguise, so, like, that's nice too. It's probably going to have decent attacks. But again, in the early game, is it going to have targets? Probably more often than not, it's going to have something, like I would say that the majority of the time. But, you know, if you're attacking on turn 3, maybe not. You kind of need to, maybe you need to play like an instant or sorcery pre-combat to give it a target. All that stuff. I think it's going to be good. It's obviously going to be a good card, but I don't know if it's going to quite get into that tier 1 status for me. Leyline of the Guild Pact. You guys can read the leyline for yourself. I'm not that, like, just take a moment to gaze upon the card and, like, think to yourself, would a card that has this mana cost be playable and limited? And if the answer to that question is yes, it might be time to reevaluate some things. Okay, anyways, moving on. Lightning Helix. Red-white for an instant. Lightning Helix deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. Yes, this is a staple. This is a classic card. It's really good. We did get an art downgrade, unfortunately, but that happens sometimes. They can't all be winners. Yeah, I mean, that's Lightning Helix. You know what, you love it. Deal 3 to any target, gain 3 is just a really good rate, and it, you know, is really annoying for your opponent to deal with. Meddling Youths. 3 red-white for a 4/5 with haste. When you attack with 3 or more creatures, investigate. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, you know, just you know, you play this on 5, it attacks. Again, on 5, a thing that attacks with haste on 5, you can have 2 other things if you don't trade off early. Like, in a lot of game states, you can kind of choose not to trade off and try to, like, sort of have, like, these creatures that are just kind of staring at each other. Sometimes you want to trade, sometimes you don't. This incentivizes you not to trade. If you have two other things that can attack, it just house. And like a 5-mana 4/5 haste by itself is pretty good in red-white. It's a pretty good card. It does have detective type as well. That is somewhat relevant in red-white, not enormously, but it does come up. It just looks really nice to me. I put it in the same tier as Lightning Helix. Don't at me. Melik, Reforged Researcher. 3 blue red for a star. Its power and toughness are each equal to twice the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and the first instant and sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 3 less to cast. So I put this in tier 3 because it's basically just a lot of, just basically stats. But, you know, it is going to be pretty big. It's going to be a 5-mana 6/6 most of the time that you cast it, I would say. Maybe not the turn that you cast it, but the turn after, for sure. One of the biggest concerns with this is that there's going to be a lot of graveyard hate in the format and graveyard interaction, and so your opponents are just going to be like, okay, I'll just remove the instants and sorceries from your graveyard, and then you're going to lose this guy. So that is something that I'm worried about. But you know, the stats by itself, I do think it's probably going to be fine, but not great. That's kind of how I feel about it. Niv Mizzet, Guild Pact. Wooburg for 6/6 flying hexproof for multicolored. When it deals combat damage to a player, it deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards, and you gain X life for X as the number of different colored players own permanents you control that are exactly 2 colors. Okay, yeah. After all that, I don't think Niv Mizzet is super castable. If you can cast it, it's okay, but yeah. I mean, it's going to be hard to cast. There is fixing in the format, but I don't think it's good enough. Like, it's not DMU level fixing, where the fixing was just so good that you could cast cards like this. I don't think it's that good. I do think that it is better than LCI's fixing. However, you know, that bar is not especially high. So, yeah, I'm not going to be casting Niv Mizzet, but you can try to cast it. I'm not going to stop you. No more lies. White blue for an instant counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it in its owner's graveyard. So it's a mana leak that costs white mana as well. Exiles, which is relevant. Yeah, mana leak's a good card. So, I mean, is it as good in limited as it is in constructed? No, but it's still pretty good. Like, you're still happy with it. You're still going to play it. You're always going to play it. I think it's going to be one of the better cards in your deck. It solves. It's excellent. It is. Well, it's not excellent because of the whatever. But it is good at solving the 2-mana problem that I've talked about on turn 4, where you want to flip your 2-mana disguise creatures. This does kind of help you fill out your mana a little bit. So it does help with that too, which is nice. Officious Interrogation. Blue-white for an instant. It costs white blue more to cast for each target beyond the first. Choose any number of target players, investigate X times, where X is the total number of creatures those players control. So this is really interesting because it doesn't impact it's pure card draw. So that's why it's in tier 4. But it's a lot. It does generate like tokens. And like if there's 4 total creatures on the board and you pay 4 mana and get, you know, 4 investigate tokens out of the deal, that's not bad. Like, that's not horrible. You can also just pay 2, and if you have like 3 or 4 creatures, you investigate like 3 times. Like, I don't know, man. I kind of like it. I kind of think it's decent, despite the fact that it has all the obvious caveats of being like pure card draw, no board impact. You know, it's slow. It investigates. Like, it doesn't actually draw you the cards. I don't think it's completely unplayable, but I don't think it's like super strong. We'll see. We'll see how it ends up faring. But my original sense would be that it's not especially great. Private Eye. 1 mana for one blue-white for a 3/3 detective. Other detectives you control get +1/+1. When you draw your second card each turn, target detective can't be blocked this turn. Yeah, no, this card's just great. We've seen the blue mana, the blue lords type lords. They're always very good. This one's going to be very good. Like, when blue has one of these cards, when blue-white has a lord that is a typed lord, It is the best deck in the format. It has been true in March of the Machine. It has been true in Brothers War. It is going to be true again in Murders of Karlov Manor. Blue-white will be the best deck in this format as a result of this card existing, and Detectives being its theme. I have seen enough at Common for that to be the case, and I would be enormously surprised if Blue-white is not the best deck in the format by a significant margin. So, push and pull. So push is a 1 white-black hybrid to destroy target tapped creature. It's a sorcery, which is notable. Pull is 4 and 2 red-black hybrids for a sorcery. Put up to 2 target creature cards from a single graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. They gain haste until end of turn and sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a really weird one. I don't like it so much. Like I like it less than some of the other ones. Sorcery speed, tapped creature removal, not very good, but playable. And pull, I don't know. Like it's kind of a finisher, but it's also like maybe generates some value, but maybe like it also exiles the stuff from the graveyard. It does deal like 5 to 10 damage, something like that, to your opponent. They don't really want to block, but that has to be from a single graveyard. So there's a lot of jankiness involved with this card, but I think that the removal spell kind of does bail it out a little bit in terms of like just being able to put it in your deck, but like in your black deck. I don't know necessarily if it's like a pull into black. You know what I mean? Rakdos, Patron of Chaos. 4 red, black for a 6/6 flying trample. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice two non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, you draw 2 cards. Yeah, this card's just excellent. It's going to take over the game, generate a bunch of value. This is just Bonehorde Dracosaur at home, but that's fine. Bonehorde Dracosaur is a messed up card, and this card is also messed up. Rakish Scoundrel, 2 black-green for a 3/3 death touch. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, and it is disguised for 4 and 2 black-green hybrid. I don't like this one. The reason I don't like it is like 6 is a lot. I know I talked like a while ago about that. I gave the black common that flips up, like the 3-drop that flips up for 6 and drains your opponent for 3, a higher grade than this, and I actually think I stand by that. The primary reason for me standing by that is I think that draining your opponent for 3 is just fundamentally better than giving something indestructible until end of turn. Now this one on the front side is maybe a little better. Like, so if you play a 4-mana 3/3 death touch that gives something indestructible until end of turn, how good of a card is that? I'm just not that excited. I'm really just not that excited about that. It may enable you to get an attack in. It doesn't actually help the attack get in, though. Unlike the dinosaur from the last set, which was +2/+0 indestructible, which I liked quite a bit by the end of the format, because that helped enable the attack. This does not help you enable the attack. You need to already have a decent attack to be able to make it work. And the disguise, I think, is just really expensive for this type of effect. But maybe, you know, it is like it is a blowout, right? It is 6 mana. Like, hey, I you know, flip my guy and eat your attacker. So that is real. That is a real thing that can happen and will happen sometimes. This also does have the potential to get blown out when you pay 6 mana and then your opponent removes it. So those both are things that can happen. Relive the past. 5 green black or 5 green white for sorcery. Return up to 1 target artifact, land, and non-aura enchantment from your graveyard to the battlefield. They are 5/5 elemental creatures in addition to their other types. So this is like kind of a weird reanimate finisher-y type card. We've seen a number of these in recent formats, and they've all performed somewhat well. So like when I first read this card, or if I had seen this card a year ago, I would think it would be terrible. But I think, just sort of based on like what I've seen recently, there is self-mill going on in this set. There is ways to get stuff into your graveyard. There are artifacts running around. There are enchantments running around, and specifically green-white. Lands, you're going to mill some lands if you mill cards, so that one shouldn't be too hard. There's also there is the Evolving Wilds that fetches, so that helps get you there too. Yeah, I just like it a lot. I mean, you really only need to get 2 things back for this to be a good card, and if you get 3, you win. So It really looks like Herd Migration to me. This card looks a lot like Herd Migration without the buyout, so I'm bumping it. Because Herd Migration was a tier 1 card, I am bumping it down a whole tier because it does not have the ability to fix your mana. But it's still a really great finisher. Repulsive Mutation. X green blue for an instant. Put X target creatures counters on up. Put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Then can counter up to one target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So, this card is very, very interesting. I really like the design, first of all. Let me just say that. I really like the design. I think the design is very good and very interesting. You can treat this like it's a counter spell in the mid-game for 2 mana. You can treat this as if it's a combat trick in the mid-game for more than 2 mana. And, you know, in some cases, on like turn 6, you're just going to be like, I'll leave this up, and then, you know, like you let's say you're ahead on board, you have like a 4/4 and a 2/2, and they have a 3/3. Like, let's say that's the board state on turn 6. You just leave this up, you know. Your tap 4/4's now tapped. Your opponent's like, well, what? Like, you gotta cast your spells. So, now the real question is, how do you like? You do have to target a creature, right? So this can get blown out. This can get blown out by your opponent being like having a removal spell up and then being like, oh, I am now going to cast. So that is like the having to target. Oh, you know what? Actually, yeah. Well, obviously it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have a target anyways. But yeah, having to target does concern me. It does. We do have issues with that, but I think there's just the straw power of like when this resolves, like you're probably just gonna win a lot of the time if you cast it for more than X = 0. So I think it's pretty good. The situationalness of it, like it does kind of get worse in multiples. It does suffer from that problem, but I kind of like it. Rift Burst, Hellion. 5 red-green for a 6/7 reach with Disguise for 4 and 2 red-green hybrids. So this is big. This is a large dude. You know, like it just got reach. It's big. It's got reach. It gets a discount. They're not, you know, it's a big creature that you can play on 3, and then on turn 6 you flip it up and attack for 6. That's kind of good. It's kind of large. You're gonna be in charge. Like, you're gonna be large and you're gonna be in charge when you cast this card. I don't think red decks really want it, but green decks probably do. So red-green decks are going to play it, and it's you can play this in green decks. Again, I don't think you're ever going to play this in red decks. I don't think it's going to be good there, but in green decks, I think you're going to play this with some regularity. Runebrand Juggler. Black-red for a 2/2 when it enters the battlefield, suspect up to 1 target creature you control. And you can pay 3 black-red and sacrifice a suspected creature. Target creature gets -5 and -5 until end of turn. So, you play this on turn 2, suspect itself. That's fine. That's totally a fine place to be. And then maybe your opponent's like, well, I can't really play on my fire card because they're just going to sacrifice their 2-drop and kill it. And it's like, well, you know, but it's not a great deal for you either to sacrifice this to kill something. But, you know, if you get your black-red, you're going to have suspected creatures. You're going to have ways to suspect creatures. It looks really good to me. Like, it looks, you know, I really like this card. I don't have it higher than this because, you know, the base rate is kind of bad. Like, it's a little bit bad. You're getting you're getting a 2/2 menace for 2, but it can't block. I don't love that. And then the ability is expensive. It doesn't, like, the one, you know, I probably should bump this up higher. And the reason is that if you draw it in the late game, suspecting something is just really good. You like suspect your 4/4, and it's just like, oh man, what a how. Like, you're just attacking with a 4/4 menace now. Yeah, that's probably worth bumping it up to tier 2. It's probably a tier 2 card, and I'm just kind of like down on it because for the sake of being down on it. But yeah, I think this is good. Sanguine Savior. 1 white-black for a 2/1 flying lifelink with Disguise for 2 black-white hybrid. When it is turn face up, another target creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, I like this. Doesn't work so well on the like turn 4 flip plan because you're not going to have necessarily another creature to give lifelink to. But you know, a lifelinker for like you're not. I mean, playing this for 3 mana is probably the least disastrous of the disguise common cycle. You know what I mean? Like, of them, of the one of the cards that kind of are templated similar to this card, you can just play this on 3. It's a 3 mana flying lifelinker. Like, that's not bad. Like, that's pretty good. Like, your opponent has to deal with it. I think that actually you're probably supposed to play it on 3 as a flying lifelinker in black-white more often than not. I would be kind of surprised if that wasn't the case. Not entirely sure. I'll get back to you. But, yeah, it seems solid to me. Shady Informant. 3 black, red for a 4/2 ogre rogue. I don't know why I'm reading the types on this one and not the other ones. When it dies, it deals 2 damage to any target, and it is disguised for 2 and 2 red-black hybrid. So, I don't love this. The reason I don't love it, yeah, I should move it up a tier, probably to tier 3. I don't know. A 4/2 is just not it. Like, it's just not it, man. Like, the deal 2 does not have the ability to, like, sometimes it'll be able to kill their thing with word 2, but a lot of times it's not. It's gonna just go face. Like, if you think about, like, you're never casting this for 5, right? Like, that's, like, that would be a horrible card. If this didn't have disguise, it would be terrible. It would be a 5 mana 4/2 that dies, deals 2 damage to any target. No, not allowed. So that's kind of, I have a really hard time seeing this be really, really good. The one thing that's nice about it is it does curve into itself. Well, there's a lot of disguised creatures for which that is not the case. This one does solve, like, does help you with that, but I'm just not in love with the card. Soul Search. A white-black for a sorcery, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, exile that card. If the card's mana value is 1 or less, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. So, if your opponent happens to be holding a shock in their hand, you win the game. And if they don't, then you just get to take a non-land. Which is fine. It's not this type of effect we've seen before, and it's like a 2 mana, and it's okay. It tends to sort of be tier 3-ish. In some games, you're just going to win because they have a shock. Or something else that's 1 mana and good. But in most games, that's not going to happen. And your opponent has to not have mana up with the shock because they can just shock your face, which is what you're definitely supposed to do if you have a shock and your opponent casts this. You're supposed to just send it to the face. Because if you don't, they're getting a 1/1 flyer. And, yeah. Sumala Sentry. Green-white for a 1/3 reach. Whenever a face-down permanent you control is turned face-up, put a +1/+1 counter on it and a +1/+1 counter on Sumala Sentry. I really like this card. Primarily because of the disguises that flip on turn 4 for 2 mana, of which there are many. Not specifically in green-white, although we'll see. Like, the green-white disguise creature does not do this. But this is a 2-drop that you can play on turn 2. It's a 2-drop that you can play on turn 4, and it's good in both spots. I really like it. I think it's really solid. It's just kind of like your opponent's kind of like, man, I kind of got to kill that, and it's kind of hard to kill. So, seems solid to me. Tesa Opulent Oligarch. 1 white-black for a 2/3 with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once each turn. The card's really good, right? 3 mana, 2/3 Death Touch, already good by itself, and then it has a bunch of other text that happens whenever your opponent loses life, and then you investigate, and you're drawing cards, and you're making 1/1 flyers, and yeah, it's really, really solid. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. It's great. 10 Street Gossip, 2 red green for a 4/4 vigilance. You can pay, and it has tap to add red green. Spend this mana only to cast face down spells or turn creatures face up. So I don't love that element of it. 4 mana 4/4 vigilance. Fine, it's a fine card. I'm basically grading it as that. I mean, the flipping stuff does matter. It will come up. You are going to spend the mana. So it's you know, it's chilling. It's also a lizard, so there's that. I don't know. That's pretty cool. The color of the color palette looks really nice with the. I'm getting off on an art tangent again. Yeah, it does help you. Like, there's that big red green dude that we saw earlier. There are other big dudes, so it helps you cast the big guys. Tossamir, Midnight's Light. 2 white green for a 3/2 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, create a wolf, but that's a 5/5 and has trample. And whenever a wolf attacks, if it attacked, also target creature your opponent control blocks the wolf. Yeah, I don't know, it's just really good. It makes two enormous threats for 5 mana, and they're both really good for you. There are actually other wolves in the set, I think. Tomic, Wielder of Law. 1 white black for a 2/4 with affinity for planeswalkers. It has flying and vigilance. And whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, which I don't understand that one. If 2 or more of those creatures were attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. So it basically says your opponent can't attack you with more than 1 creature. It doesn't say that exactly, but so I'm trying to think about how good this card is. It's definitely good. I was debating, what is this, tier 1 or tier 2 good? The reason I kept it out of tier 1 is, so how good is a 3 mana 2/4 flying vigilance? Like, how good is that? I put it in tier 2, so that's where it was, and I was like, okay, on the average board state, into a 3 mana 2/4 flyer, how often are you going to want to attack with more than 1 creature? And the answer is not that often. So I think that this isn't necessarily, it's already kind of preventing you from doing the thing that it is preventing you from doing, right? Like, the 2/4 flying vigilance already makes it so that you can't really attack with 2 or more creatures. And then the ability is like, well, you definitely can't attack with 2 or more creatures. So yeah, that kind of it's like, is it really doing something with that ability, or is the ability kind of just really don't do that thing I already was kind of not allowing you to do by being on the board? So yeah, I think it's a solid card. Treacherous Greed. 1 white black for an instant as additional cost to cast this spell. Sacrifice a creature that dealt damage this turn, draw 3 cards, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Yeah, I mean, this is a really hard card to evaluate. I'm going to keep it 100% real with you. I have put it in tier 3, which is kind of a cop-out grade, but I originally had it lower, and I decided that there's enough tokens, and enough of them are 1/1s with flying, that, and if you can cast this and sacrifice a 1/1 flyer, which is going to happen in some percentage of games, it's really good. It is really good. Draining your opponent for 3, drawing 3 cards for 3 mana, and instant speed. Now, instant speed doesn't really matter, but at instant speed, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. And then sometimes your opponent, sometimes there'll be a combat where you attack with a 2/3 and it bounces off their 2/3, and then you can cast this, and that's fine, and you can do that. And sometimes you'll attack on turn 4 with your disguised creature, and your opponent will be like, guess I can't block, and then you can cast this on turn 4, and just it's kind of a blowout. So there's that too. I guess they can block because of the rule, but I think they're probably still not super supposed to block. Maybe they'll block. I don't know. I don't know. Trostani, 3 Whispers. Green-white and a green-white hybrid for 4/4. It has 3 abilities. 1 in a green, target creature gains death touch until end of turn. Green-white hybrid, target creature gains vigilance until end of turn, and 2 and a white, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Yeah, this is really good. I have, like, the mana cost concerns me. It is, you know, not easy to cast on turn 3, so I put it in tier 2 for that reason. But yeah, it's good. It's really good. Maybe it's even tier 1 good, and I'm just like being stupid and like stingy for no reason, being like, oh, 3 mana 4/4, that's not good enough. The threat of activation on the abilities is nice. It's good. It's a good card. What do you want from me? It's good. It's good. It is mana restrictive. It forces you to play exactly green-white, which is not necessarily where you want to be, but we'll see. Undercover Crocodile. 4 green-blue for a 5/5. When it deals combat damage to a player, investigate. And it has disguise for 3 and 2 green-blue hybrid. I kind of like this one. It's pretty big. You can, like, on turn 5, it's probably going to have a good attack. So, as a result, you know, you get to attack with it on turn 5. Your opponent may want to, like, chump block it, or do, like, it just, you know, it's kind of just like a big dude that draws you some cards, and, like, I like it. I kind of like it. One of the hidden things about these, like, large disguised creatures too is, like, when they trade, if you could, like, trade off early with, like, their disguised creature, you get something for collect evidence in your graveyard as well. So there is that like little, like, thing to think about too, where it's like, should I try to trade off with my disguised creature early? And if you have a bunch of collect evidence stuff, maybe the answer is yes. So this actually helps with that. Urgent Necropsy. 2 black-green for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of the permanents the spell targets. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, creature, planeswalker, and enchantment. And so you have to collect evidence for the total mana value of the stuff you're destroying, which is a lot, by the way. It's like, if you're destroying, you know, generally this is probably destroying, like, if, let's say, like, okay, I'm targeting a creature, let's say it's a 4-drop, I have to collect evidence for. It's not, like, it's not the easiest ask ever, and then it only gets more difficult, but in black-green, you know, it should be castable. I'm just still not super thrilled about the front side of this card, like 4 mana remove a thing. You know, the one thing that's nice about this, though, is it does get to remove, you know, I actually should bump this up a tier because of this fact. Destroying a clue is free. It's literally free. You can just do it for free. But I still don't like my removal to be like this conditional, where it's like, I can't remove their thing the turn that I want to. So I do have, I'm going to leave it where it is, but I kind of, you know, it has applications. Like, the destroying a clue is actually real. But if your opponent has 2 mana up, they negate that. So it's like, is that actually, it can destroy Thopters and stuff too. So that part of the card is nice. That is a nice piece of the card, but not exciting. Actually, hold on. I don't actually know how this works. Oh, that has to, like, ward. I don't know how it works with the disguised stuff. I think their mana value is 0, but maybe it's, no, their mana value is 3. Their mana value is 3. So yeah, that doesn't work. Vanifar Evolved Enigma. 2 green-blue for a 3/4 at the beginning of your turn. Combat on your turn. Cloak a card from your hand, or put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. Yeah, I mean, this just generates tons of value. I mean, no, it doesn't generate value in the sense that it's coming from the cards coming from your hand, but you're going to have cards in your hand. It's turn 4, and it's like making a 2/2 for free, and then you can also just choose to make all your colorless stuff bigger. Like, if you like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, just generating value and then whatever. So it's like, it's not really value so much. It's more tempo, high tempo plays and whatnot. But tempo is value, right? Yeah, it's just good. It's really good. Maybe I should move it to tier 2 instead of tier 1. I don't know. I don't think so. Foja, Jaws of the Conclave. 2 red, green, white for a 5/5 wolf. Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 3. Whenever it attacks, put X+1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control, and you draw a card for each wolf you control. So most of the attack trigger doesn't really matter, but you do just draw a card whenever it attacks, and also it's a 5/5 Vigilance, Trample, Word 3 for 5. So yeah, this card is a house. So yeah, it's really good. War Leader's Call. 1 red white for an enchantment. Creature user you control get +1/+1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So we've seen anthems recently, and they've been kind of not like medium to not great. This one looks good to me. It is just a 3-mana anthem, and at the end of the day, you're just dealing 1 for the rest of the game every time a creature enters the battlefield under your control. It counts tokens, it counts all this stuff. The the red-white disguise creature at common just it deals 4 damage or 3 damage right off the bat. Like, this is just it's so good. Like, this card just seems really good to me. It plays really well. It doesn't impact the board by itself, so it isn't tier 2 instead of tier 1. Be advised. Wisp Drinker, Vampire, 2 white-black for a 2/4. With flying, whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Creatures you control with power 2 or less gain death touch and lifelink until end of turn. And you can pay, that's for 7 total mana. So yeah, I mean, we've seen like we have seen the 4-mana 2/4 flying stat line recently not be very good. I think in this set it's going to be better than it has been, but still I'm not, super thrilled. And there are enough, you can cast a disguised creature and drain your opponent for 1, and that's nice, and that's going to be a nice little payoff for this, and like that's a reason to whatever, it does the thing, and it has late game applications. I think it's solid, but I don't think it's like busted or anything. It's kind of how I feel about this card. World Souls Rage X, red, green for a sorcery. It deals X damage to any target, but up to X cards from your hand and or graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Yes, this is mostly just an X removal spell, which are not very good. You have to pay an additional 1 too, so it's a lot of mana. But you do get some lands back, and if you have them in your hand in your graveyard, but like you have to mill them to get them there, and whatever. I'm not saying it's completely unplayable, but I don't love it. I think that it's probably just a little too overcosted. And the final multicolored card, Yaris, Roar of the Old Gods. 2 red-green for a 4/4. Other creatures you control have haste. Whenever one or more face-down creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Whenever a face-down creature you control dies, return to the battlefield face down under its owner's control if it's a permanent card, then turn it face up. So, it just, allows your stuff to attack, and then if it dies, you get to flip it. Really, really good. It does not do anything by itself, but you're going to have face-down creatures, you're going to play them on curve into this. Seems like a really strong card to me. Doesn't seem like uber busted, because it is just like a dies to removal. There is decent removal, but I mean, it's a threat. It is a threat, and I like it. So that's it. That's the multicolor stuff. If you were here for the entire hour and a half long that this took to do, great. My voice is now going to be dead forever. So if you enjoyed it, I'll see you next time.